darkness, it's never too late. Through the dust, the breath we sense. In this realm, it's all intense. Searching the portal of the paranormal, we delve deep. In shadows thick, where data creeps. Bring the history back to life. We fight in this haunted realm. We stand and ignite.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another show of PTTP Paranormal UnCut. Thank you for everyone that's joining in. Bob, hey Bob, how you doing? I hope you're doing well. Thank you for coming in. I know we have Harmony of Hearts in. Sarah, hello, darling. So thank you for everyone. Suzanne, everyone joining in. We've got a great show lined up this evening. Nick, how you doing, pal? Hope you're well. Abby and everyone else join in. Tonight we have an absolutely great show lined up for you. In a moment, we are going to be joined by David Sloan. He's an author. He has spent 25 years researching the haunted history of the Florida Keys. But the reason we're going to be talking to David tonight is over the last 30 years, he has been doing research and been looking after this chap here, Robert the Doll. Now, just a brief description. Robert was manufactured I believe in Germany, but in 1904, he was purchased by Robert Eugene Otto's grandfather as a gift. Now, over the years, things have been happening with Robert the Doll, which has continued, and it's been on TV. On Discovery Plus, you can actually watch a show called The Curse of Robert the Doll, which this is where I first come across the show, and listening to the story is absolutely amazing. As the years went on, the doll lived at this property, 534 Eaton Street. And the property was sold on, other families become responsible with Robert the Doll. And over the years, a lot of these families were terrorized by this doll. But then David, now over the last 30 years, he has been researching and he has control over the doll at the museum in Key West. And we're going to find out how this come about, and we're going to find out more about the background of Robert the Doll. Now, throughout the show, if you do have any questions for David, please put them in the chat and we'll try our best to get through. But everyone join me and welcome David to the show. Hello.
Hey, Nando. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you very much for agreeing. As I was saying, when I watched The Curse of Robert the Doll on Discovery, it was just crazy. Some of the stuff that they were saying about the curses that people experience, not showing respect, and then their pets would die, something would happen to them, But, like I just said, you've had Robert the Doll now for 30 years. What would be great to know, how did you come to encounter Robert in the first place?
Well, you're 100% correct that, some of the things that they'll show about the doll are just unbelievable. And in Key West, we always say that the truth is stranger than fiction. And that's definitely the case with Robert the Doll. One of the things that I find nowadays, I try to differentiate between paranormal and paranormal entertainment. Because a lot of the shows will, try to make things a little juicier, or they'll have the, with the editing, they make things look pretty fantastic. So there's a lot of misinformation out there about Robert, but the true story is even more bizarre than what we see. So you go back to 1996, and I was starting a ghost tour in Key West. I'd actually been in Scotland, and I saw the ghost tour there, and we didn't have them in the United States. There might have been 2 or 3 ghost tours in the United States, and no internet, so nobody's talking about them. When I saw this ghost tour in Scotland. I said, oh my God. I'd been a fan of ghosts for a long time, but I didn't know you could make a living telling ghost stories. So I quit my job managing cruise ships and I moved to Key West and slept on my friend's kitchen floor to start researching ghosts. And I didn't find anything in Key West for 2 weeks. And I had been going to the different bars and tipping the bartenders really well and saying, hey, is this the haunted bar? And everybody kept saying, no, I don't know of any ghosts. And I'd been to the library, nothing. So I'm getting ready to leave and I get lost and I'm flustered. I don't know where my life's going. Somebody appeared in my passenger seat and I just heard their voice. They said, go back to the library. And I turned to them. I said, I don't know where the library is. And when I looked over, nobody's there. But the voice had been so clear. And the one thing I remembered, their sleeve, they had, it was like they were wearing a suit. And it was almost like a tweed sleeve. And I look up and there's a sign that says library parking only. So I pull over. I go back into the library for the third time. And this time the historian was back in the Florida history room. And I told him, I said, I'm looking for a book on the ghosts of Key West. He said, oh, there are none. And I started to leave. And he said, wait. No books, but we've got ghosts. And he goes into this walk-in vault. And, it's a special room built to preserve and protect all the documents from hurricanes and things like that. So it's not allowed in there. That's why I could never find anything. And he came out with this file full of ghost stories from the last 50 years in Key West. And that moment pretty much changed my life. I start knocking on doors. I go to the artist house that you showed the picture of. I hadn't found anything about Robert. It was the ghost of Ann Otto. So I knock on the door. She was the wife of the boy who had Robert the doll. Well, the man by that time. But I knock on the door and I get the guy who had owned the place for about 15 years. And when I told him I wanted to talk to him about his ghost, he said, oh, you want to hear about Robert? I said, no, I want to hear about Anne. He said, no, you want to hear about Robert. And he told me that story about a haunted doll, created with voodoo that moves around. And I thought, this guy's insane. And then he said, do you want to go up and see the room where he used to live?
Wow.
And as soon as he said that, the phone flew off the hook that was about 10 feet away from us. And I looked at that and he said, yeah, he's ready for you. And we go up the stairs and into the attic room, and it was still furnished with the little furniture that had been used for the doll, little chairs and tables. It looked like a creepy tea party about to start. And then the energy changed, and you could tell that something was there. You could feel that you weren't alone. And I thought I was going to throw up if I didn't get out of there. So I asked Daryl, I said, where's this doll now? And he told me it's up at an old fort. It's called Fort East Martella Museum, but he's not on display. You'll call up if you want to see him. And so we arranged for that. And when the curator there brought the doll out, she was cradling him like a little baby. And she said, Robert, this is David. He's here to take some photos of you. He's starting a ghost tour. And she set him down, and there was nothing to the doll. He looked creepy. He's the size of a child. He's the size of like a 5-year-old child. And he's dressed in an old sailor suit. And he had this sailor hat on his head. And today he's got the nice little propped up hat. Back then it was hanging down over his face. And I took a couple pictures just because he's interesting. And then I said, I want to get a photo without his hat. And when I reached over and picked his hat up off of his head, I swear to you, that doll came alive. His expressions changed. I could tell I was no longer alone in the room. And I thought, oh my God, I've got to get a photo of this. So I take the camera. I try to snap a picture. It doesn't work. I try a second time. It doesn't work. 3 times, nothing. I turn to look at the camera to see what I'm doing wrong. it shoots 3 photos of my face.
Wow.
When I turn around to do it again, nothing. And I heard a giggle. And then the life just left the doll. It went back to being an inanimate object. And that was really the moment where I said, I've got to find out what's going on with this doll. And that kind of started this journey that, and here I am almost 30 years later, still finding new things out. So
It's amazing. 30 years with what has been reported one of the most haunted objects, dolls that you can have, and you've spent 30 years of your life with this doll. When going back when you first was introduced to Robert the doll, and you were saying that she was cradling him like a baby, what was going through your mind? Like, because some people be like, is this person crazy? Is it, what was your initial thought when you saw her cradling the doll like an actual baby?
I thought the people in Key West were crazy. First Daryl talking about the doll like that, and then the way she was treating it. So having 2 people within a week, talking about this doll as a person, because that was new to me. And I'd been a believer in ghosts. I grew up, hearing ghost stories, seeing ghosts occasionally, but talking about a doll, I mean, I'd never really considered haunted objects. So, there's that skeptic in us where, and I really thought, Key West is an eccentric town, but I really thought, wow, these people are strange. But then, and here I am 30 years later, kind of talking to, I absolutely treat the doll like a child now. And that's the interesting thing, when we discovered Robert, like when they didn't have him on display. He wasn't the star that he is now. Stories about him did go back, to the 1940s and 50s. And his origin story was that he was given as a gift to a little boy, and that they believe it was made with voodoo. But they called him the Enchanted Doll. He was Robert the Enchanted Doll. And a lot of what he did, he was looked at as a prankster. And there were dark things that were blamed on him, but it wasn't quite the level of malevolence that you encounter now with the story. But nobody knew. They didn't know what kind of doll he was. They said angry nanny. That was the story we kept hearing, was angry nanny, that gave him as a gift to the child. And they said she was either mistreated by the family or, she was a servant for the family. But we didn't know. So that was my first mission. It's like, okay, what's going on with this doll? As you mentioned, one theory said that it was created by his grandfather and given to him. And the source of that is one story says, his grandfather purchased it in the Dry Tortugas, which is one of the keys near Key West, from a man who made that type of thing. But the problem is the grandfather was dead before the doll was made. But nobody knew at the time. So the first thing I did was I spent thousands of hours researching dolls and trying to find out like what type of doll he was. And I don't take credit for what I discovered. I feel like the right things were put in place for me to discover them. And I saw a picture online one day and I'm like, that looks like his twin. And it was a Steiff doll. And Steiff it's the company that invented the teddy bear. They're out of Germany. And their signature is a button in the ear. That's how they identify them. And with most dolls like this, the kids pull them around by their ears, so the ears, Robert's original ears aren't there.
Oh, okay.
And that's why nobody could identify him.
Wow.
So that was a huge breakthrough. But then the stories, I went to, that walk-in vault that I told you about at the library.
Yeah.
I saw a picture of the Ottos somewhere, and it was a wedding photo. And so I asked the person, I said, where did that come from? And they said, oh, there was a box in that vault. So I got to go into the vault and I found 5 boxes of Otto family history. And it was, I mean, letters between family members, photographs. I found a photograph of Gene Otto in the sailor suit that Robert's wearing today.
Oh
I
wow.
found a photo of him with his nanny. I found a family history that identified the nanny. So that was a huge treasure trove. And what we were able to do is start reverse engineering the legends. The angry nanny story. I identified her as Emmeline Abbott, and then we identified her as the nanny, and her husband was a servant. And I found a lawsuit she filed against the family in 1924.
Wow.
So it makes her the angry nanny. So that fell into place. So even though Robert has German origins, these legends are starting to make sense.
So they're coming in from all angles, really, aren't they? So that's amazing.
Yeah.
I just want to touch on a comment from one of the viewers, Daniel, the owner of Portal to the Paranormal, actually. He's saying a lot of people claim to have been cursed by the doll. Do you think that due to the care, basically the care that you've given Robert, that he wouldn't harm you?
Well, okay, so multiple entities tie into that. And that was one of the big things. It was a big source of confusion. I identified the main spirit in Robert as a little girl.
Okay.
The daughter of Emmeline Abbott. And if you look through some of the early accounts of hauntings in the artist house or the Otto home, then you find that people talk about a little black girl there. And she tied in with the nanny because when I looked at census records, it showed that Emmeline Abbott in 1900 had no kids. 1910, she had no kids living, 1 kid dead. So she lost a child about the time that Robert the Doll arrived. And so once I realized that presence, and I started putting together the book with all the information that I had uncovered, I started getting attacked.
Oh, wow.
And you and I talked about this real briefly previously. So I didn't know what it was or why it was happening. It happened at the same point every time in the book. And I lost 4 hard drives, lost all the information. And I got to where I had the keystroke backup.
Yeah.
And when I got the terabyte drive sent to me, it contained everything from my computer except the info about Robert the Doll. And then things took a darker turn. It went from, lights flickering and things like that to strange things with electricity, where if I reached into we had a basket of bike lights by the door. I'd reach in for one and all of them would turn on, like 10 of them would turn on and start flashing. I'd get extreme shocks from pieces of metal I touched, and not like a static shock, things that would almost, they'd throw my arm so hard it almost dislocated it. And then I was walking my dog, and there's a huge palm frond. I mean, like the palm fronds in Key West, they can be like 15 feet long. And it had been raining, and this one was extremely heavy. We were looking at it. It lifted up in the air and shot towards us and dropped at my feet. And the dog kind of yelps and runs back. I walk back with the dog. The thing picked up a second time and did that. And then after that, it started trying to take over my thoughts.
Oh, wow.
And it felt like a gray pizza dough on my head. And I know that's kind of weird, but just, imagine if a big pizza dough is placed on your head and started soaking into your head.
Yeah.
That's the sensation that I had. And at first I could tell which thoughts were mine and which ones weren't, but it got to a point where I couldn't. And I was freaked out. I haven't been religious in a long time, but I started going to the Catholic Church. It started attacking me there. I was sleeping behind the church. I remember friends checking on me, and I was just crying. And I told them, I said, either I'm insane or a spirit's attacking me. And either one isn't good. And then we had a point where I was yanked from my bed. And like I yelped when it happened. And I remember my wife saying, she said, "What's wrong?" And she had a sleep mask on. And she says, what's wrong? I said, I'm falling out of bed because I was reaching below myself and I couldn't feel anything. And she said, well, get back in. And she goes back to sleep. I said, I can't, I'm still falling. And then I look, my eyes started adjusting more, and I was just about 1.5 feet, 2 feet from the ceiling and the ceiling fan. And I thought to myself, oh, God, help me. When I did that, I dropped. And I wasn't even over the bed. I was about 6 feet to the left of it. And we've got tile floors. I dropped hard, and I couldn't get up right away, but my computer was there. So I went on Facebook and I posted, I said, I'm dealing with an entity I can't handle, and I desperately need help. If you can't help me, don't comment. And someone put me in touch with a local Santeria priest. Are you familiar with Santeria over there?
No.
Santeria, it's not really voodoo, but it has African roots. And what happened is when during the slave trade, when the slaves were brought over, they had their African gods, but the slave owners didn't want them worshiping them. They said, no, you have to worship, the Catholic gods. So they took the saints that matched up with the characteristics of their gods and gave them those names. And everybody said, oh, look, they're worshiping saints. They're Santeros or Santeria. So that religion ended up saving my life, I believe. The guy came over, he went through the house, and he's like, David, I'm not getting anything. And then when we get to the bedroom, he says, oh my God, there it is. And he told me several details about myself that nobody could know. And he said his spirit guide is making him say that so that I know that he's telling the truth. And he said the spirit was too powerful for him to deal with on his own. So, and he had to bring his family from Miami. And I was willing to pay any amount for this. I asked him how much, and he said, no charge. We're just doing it to help. Mm-hmm. And they came down, they did a misa espiritual. It's basically a spirit mass. Middle of the afternoon, windows open, lights on. And I saw spirits as clearly as I'm seeing you. And they did this ceremony where they introduced me to my spirit guides. They removed the spirits that were in me, and they didn't remove just one or two. They removed dozens of spirits. And that's when I started to realize that within Robert, it's not just the little girl. There's other spirits there that thrive on the negativity that many people bring to the museum.
Wow. So the little girl, would you say that she's a calm spirit within Robert then?
For the most part. So, she's a little girl, and you have to figure if a little girl, we think she was about 5. But if she's been around for over 100 years, she's not completely a little girl. And people will tell you, they say you have to ask Robert's permission to take a photo.
I've heard, yeah.
I always say, no, it's dangerous. I mean, this as an investigator, that when you ask a spirit for permission, you're somewhat inviting it in. Or you're putting it above you. I tell people, don't ask permission. Just be respectful. And the way it seems to work is when people go in, because you get people looking for Chucky, and they'll go in and they'll give the finger to the doll, or they'll stick their tongue out, or they say cruel things, challenging it in some way. And the way it seems to work is when this little girl gets her feelings hurt, she'll kind of tag the person who's been disrespectful to her. Imagine like a sticky tar. Yeah. And then once she tags them and identifies them as being disrespectful, these other entities come out of the doll, and they'll latch on and stick with that person and follow them home, and they'll infiltrate their thoughts, and they'll bring misfortune and bad luck. And the only way to send them back to the doll is to apologize. And Robert has more than 10,000 letters now.
I was going to say, because a lot of people have gone in to see Robert. He's in the encasement, and they've not followed the rules. And, with what I saw, he's had stacks of letters, people asking for his forgiveness. Like, you know, which is crazy. But you know, with yourself, 30 years with Robert, then, but not necessarily just Robert, but with these spirits,
Mhm.
you know, do you feel him when you're at home? Then, like, is he constantly connected to you? Would you say?
Yes and no. You know, it's been so strange because at first I did think there was a single entity, and then when I realized that there were multiples, uh, I realized it was my obligation to take care of the little girl spirit and to nurture that spirit. So, like when I'm setting up for tours at night, and just to clarify too, I don't own Robert the doll. I'm the fourth person in his history who cares for the spirits. The museum that owns him, you know, he's an artifact, and they care for the artifact because of my work with the doll before he was on display and with finding his history. They kind of leave all the paranormal to me. And uh, and you know he's had okay, so there's his creator, Margaret Steiff at the Steiff Company, and then you had the boy Gene Otto, who had him from 1904 up until he died in 1974. After that, Myrtle Reuter took over. She bought the house, and when she bought the house, um, Robert was in the little cedar chest, and she saw the child's spirit, and she wanted to care for that spirit, and it changed her. And you know, people judged her for it. And uh, about 100 days before she died, she took the doll to the museum, and she said, "I've never had an issue with him, but last night he shoved me into my room and he held the door so I couldn't get out. I need you to take the doll." And so then Robert sat there just in storage for a little over a year. That's when I arrived and started so pretty much caring for the spirit. But with when they did the shock doc and Cindy Kaza came down, I was really impressed because, you know, we talk about paranormal entertainment. I wouldn't have been surprised if whoever they sent was kind of prepared for the story, you know, if they told them certain aspects. And she said that she came in blind and she was very sincere. But then the things that she started picking up on, nobody knew except me. You know, I spent over 1,000 hours in the library going through the handwritten letters between family members, and I know a lot of details that really nobody ever cares about. So they're not talked about. And Cindy started picking up on them. We went to different rooms. She knew which room served which function, even though you couldn't tell, you know, because it's a bed and breakfast today. So you couldn't tell which room was his studio and which room was her piano and which room was the hospital or the doctor's office. So I was really impressed with what she picked up on. And what made a lot of things make sense for me is when she said, "Yes, you're correct. There's the little girl. That's the main spirit." She did die in the house, and the boy's father was a doctor. And so when the girl died, you know, the mom had brought her to the doctor. And when he didn't save her, Cindy says, you know, she sought out a voodoo practitioner because she blamed him for the death.
Wow.
And that's how the curse manifested within the doll. And Cindy said that it's not just multiple spirits. It's not the little girl and a couple of others. She said there's a portal inside the doll, and that it's many, many, many spirits. And
Wow.
this made sense to me because, you know, you'll have more than 100 people at a time claiming that they have that they're being cursed by Robert. And there's obviously the elements where people have bad things happen, right? So there's some people where I'm sure Robert has nothing to do with it, but they blame the doll because it's an easy way to
Because
go.
it's that one thing that they can set their mind to, and
Yeah.
it's an actual thing that they can see. And it sort of relates because that's what Liz was asking. Do other spirits get attracted and join, you know, with what's going on with Robert, do you think? Or is it, how many spirits do you think is encased in Robert the doll?
So according to Cindy, she says that there's an unlimited supply. You know, she says that there's the portal there and they just wait. And I used to think that they were all bad, but what I really think is they're protectors of the child and they're taking advantage of the energy that's there. Because somebody started the legend that Robert was the inspiration for Chucky. and in the Child's Play movies, and it's not true. But that story's out there, and that started bringing negative energy to the fort, where people wanted an evil doll. And when people want that, I think whatever energies are around will gravitate to that. So they'll come through, and they'll play whatever part you want. Now, there's a couple of dark ones that seem to be the primary spirits besides the little girl. And when you see them, they're 8 feet tall. They're very dark shadows, and they lurk all around his case.
Wow.
But beyond that, it seems like there's a lot of them. So to get back to the question, some of the spirits there I think are good, some are bad. And realizing that you're dealing with an entire army, so to speak. So I think a lot of it depends on how you approach it. We get a lot of kids, children with autism who come to the fort. A lot of times they don't see the evil doll that so many people talk about. They'll come in, they'll say, "Oh, I like Robert. Robert's my friend."
Wow.
So a lot of it, I think, is what we attract, what we have going on inside.
Brilliant. Sarah's also asked, has anyone in the museum witnessed Robert walking about over the years, him being there at all?
So I just had a conversation. One of the legends about Robert was that, with the curator who was there, and she came in the morning and heard tapping on the glass. And when she turned over and looked, Robert was there and kind of came alive. She's the same one who was supposed to have seen Robert's feet dirty after he had just been cleaned, refurbished, restored, whatever. And so I talked to her, and she said, "I'll never forget that time that I was in there and I looked down at his feet, and his feet were dirty that morning." And so that was really cool, getting the firsthand account from that, because I had heard the story but didn't know who it was. And then other people in the museum, I know a lot of people who started working there and only lasted a few days because of things that had happened. There was somebody who got scratched. I've been scratched in the fort before. There's people who get burned with crosses. There's a lot of interesting things that happen in there, but you can't attribute it all to Robert, because there's just a lot going on. The fort's built on indigenous burial ground. There's portals that people report in there. A lot of the psychics pick up on that. The place used to be a hospital. Never saw active battle, but it was a hospital during the Civil War. So there's a lot of death and a lot of darkness there.
Wow. Liz is also, Nick's asked, when Cindy went and investigated the doll, she mentioned about this portal. Have you had anyone, or did Cindy try and close down that portal, or have you left the portal as it is?
She said it couldn't be closed.
It couldn't be. Wow.
She said it can't be closed. And I don't know. Everything that she said was so spot on. At one point, she started talking. She was talking to me. She said, "Oh, your grandfather's here," and she started describing him. And the director came in and said, "Hey, get back to Robert. Stop talking about this." And it was really interesting, because so I'd researched Robert for a long time. I've only been doing tours up at the fort for the last 4 years. When I started doing that, I really dug into the Civil War history. And my dad tells me, "Hey, the first David Sloan, who's my great-great-great-grandfather, he says he was in the Civil War." I looked up his obituary. He was in the Pennsylvania 47th Volunteers. So that was part of the Union. When I heard that name, I thought, no, this can't be true. Key West was part of the Union during the Civil War. Pennsylvania 47th Volunteers were in charge of the island for most of the Civil War, and they helped build the fort where Robert the Doll is right now.
Wow.
So there's that family connection, which blew me away. But then on top of that, Cindy didn't know anything about that. And she started picking up on my great-great-great-grandfather and him being there.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's and the connection there as well. But he's at the fort. You have people coming to visit. Is there a routine that you have or a protocol that you have before allowing people in? To when they go to see Robert. Do you have like talks telling them what they can and can't do? How careful do you have to be to let members of the public in?
So I tell everybody be respectful. What I've found, people are so scared going in there today because when somebody does a YouTube video, they people will try to make it like he's a really evil doll. So people are frightened going in there, but we just tell them be respectful, respect Robert the doll, respect his fort, and you're not going to have a problem. With the photo thing, for a long time they had on the wall at the museum, it said, don't forget to ask Robert's permission to take a photo. But, they're not paranormal investigators. So they just kind of go along with the legend. The way it all started, Robert messed with so many cameras, just like he did with me. Batteries were draining, film would get developed, and the only pictures that would turn out were of Robert. There was a friend of mine who had a photo developing place here. He started asking people if they had visited the doll because his machine would get stuck on photos of Robert. And, he'd pop away for a minute. He'd come back and there would be 100 photographs of Robert printed out until he ran out of the developing fluid and paper. So what ended up happening is a human says, oh, he's messing with cameras. Maybe he doesn't like his picture being taken. And then somebody else says, oh, I guess we should ask his permission. And then here we are 25 years later with people saying, oh, you better ask his permission or he's going to curse you. But the fact is, that's kind of silly because if you ask his permission, what's he going to do? Is he going to nod his head and say yes? The movement of the doll, when I've seen it, I mean, he has thrown his little stuffed lion. There are reports of him moving, but most of the time it's the doll going from not being alive to that spirit entering it. And that's when for that flash second, it's almost like when the spirit is meeting the physical artifact, it creates that brief appearance of movement. It's like you can see both of them for a split second. And I think that's what people are really encountering there. Sorry, I got a little wrapped up in that there.
No, that's great. And for you've spent a lot of time with Robert. Then with these spirits, how do you take yourself away from him? Because it sounds like it's like 30 years of your life dedicating yourself to the history of the doll, and we're talking about the most recent developments that you've had as well in the moment. But is there a way that you can disconnect yourself from him, or how do you unwind from this doll?
That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer because anytime that I try to think that I'm in control, I get some kind of a message that is completely out of my hands. I've always been terrible at protecting myself or at cleansing myself, and it's allowed for a lot of attachments through the years. When I got the help from my friends who did the Misa, they assigned me, well, they introduced me to my spirit guides, but then they assigned me pretty much a door lady. She's got the velvet rope, and any spirits come around, she's like, hey, private party. And she'll communicate with me who's there. So she'll tell me what's going on, which gives me a little bit of an understanding. But still, a little over a year ago, I think, I did a trip where I followed my great-great-grandfather's Civil War path, because the Pennsylvania 47th had been in New Orleans and other parts of Florida. And I went to the different battlefields and the places. The entire trip, I swear I was cursed. Everything that could go wrong did. And it wasn't just a matter of, oh, bad thing. It was horrible, horrible things left and right. And I finally hit a point when I was in Tallahassee, and I'm like, I can't have another thing go wrong. So I'm like, I'm done. And I canceled the rest of my trip. I booked a flight to fly back to Key West. As soon as I hung up that phone, everything got lighter. And it was almost like I went off into like a deep sleep, but I was still very wide awake. And then I thought I was having a heart attack, and I popped up, and I remember clutching my chest, and I turned over on my side. And as I did that, something rolled out of me, and it was like shaped like me. It was like a shell of me. It looked like the Gollum, that little creature from the Lord of the Rings, or
Oh
the
yeah,
Hobbit,
I know what you're on about. Yeah.
which sounds so ridiculous, but that's pretty much what it looked like. And I remember it rolled out of me, and when it did, it looked back really surprised, and it let out this little scream, and then it turned into a black mist and disappeared.
Wow.
And I remember when that happened, I'm like, okay, what was that? Uh, and I figured that when I was at the fort before I left on vacation, that the little girl spirit must have attached to me. And I figured it had that appearance because it because it had, it's the little girl's 120 years old. So I kind of assumed that uh, that was just her. But then last week I had something happen that made me realize it was something completely different.
Oh,
So
well, maybe we'll get into that. But there is a question that I just want to ask before. People must know you quite well now to have a lot of dealings with Robert the Doll. Do you have members of the public that are quite weary to be round your presence because of the history of this doll? And, do they see you and think, oh, we're scared to go near you because of Robert? Or
not as
spirits
not
around?
as much me. I mean, I don't get invited to many funerals.
Oh,
um, so I'll steer clear of things like that. I mean, and that's with ghost stuff in general, because I don't want to be the ghost guy showing up uh, at something like that.
mm,
Uh, but no, people seem to uh, their fear really tends to be directed more towards the doll. Um, you know, I've been in Key West for a long time, and people here know me, and I'm not a scary guy. They know that I have other interests in history, and so primarily I like digging up the stories and solving legends and things like that. And and anybody who talks with me about the doll, they'll realize that they're not in great danger with the doll. But I'll sign books for people. I've given people books before, and they're like, oh no, thank you. They're like, no, my husband won't let me bring that in the house.
no, we don't want that. That's brilliant. Rob's asked, are there any letters, notes, or objects visitors leave behind after they've had interactions with Robert the Doll? And if so, do you keep them and do you read every one? And another question to add to it is, do you read it to Robert as well?
Yeah. So me, and then so there's the museum staff in the daytime, and the staff there, if they get the letters, they'll read them to Robert, or they'll leave them out for us to do at night. Because there's me, and then there's I've got a team of 3 other people who we do the tours and take care of the doll. So we'll always read those letters. And then what's happening now, Robert's becoming so popular all over the world, and a lot of people can't mail a letter. So people will they'll email me on the Haunted Key West site, and I'll read those letters to Robert. And we're working on where we'll actually record ourselves reading it, so people can know that it did happen. But yeah, we absolutely read them, and then those letters become part of the museum's collection. They used to hang them up on the walls, but they ran out of room. So now they have select letters showing on the video screen, and the rest of them, once they're read to Robert, they go to the archives, and they're all saved. And the last count that I had on that was over 10,000 letters.
Blimey. Bill Slavin, great guy. I got to
I
interview him.
love Bill. Hey,
And
Bill.
he's just said here, my wife has met David with me, but she will not meet Robert. laugh out loud.
Yeah.
It's crazy that this doll can have that impact on people.
Yeah.
And we were talking the other night, and you were saying about new developments that you've started to uncover. Are you happy to share that with everyone about the new stuff that you've got coming through about Robert?
Absolutely. So, as much as we know about the story, we find, okay, so like the big landmarks, we're finding out that he was made by the Stife company, identifying the nanny, identifying the child, multiple spirits. So there's these different landmarks as far as I'm concerned in telling the story. What never made sense to me, though, I thought, okay, if the primary spirit's the little girl, every account that we have is that when the doll was given to the boy, he immediately became enchanted by it. And so that always just left something with me. I'm like, why? What happened when the doll was made? So there was somebody at the fort last week, and I wasn't going to do the tour. We had a guide scheduled, and a friend of mine called in, and he said, listen, they really want to go out with you. Would you be willing to meet them? I said, yeah, I'll come meet them at the fort. And we started going around, and she was very in tune to things, and she's taking classes on developing her psychic abilities. And she said, they tell me that I'm a really good candidate for this. And my spirit guide, my door lady there,
Yeah,
starts telling me, she's like, this is the most powerful person you've ever encountered. And she's just saying that she knows a lot. And so we get to the yellow fever tunnel at the fort, and I've got these night vision cameras, and we encounter a lot of soldiers' spirits down there. And I see her go down, and she leans down and starts having a conversation with the child. And I'm looking at her, I said, oh my God, she sees the little girl. And I'm thinking, what's the little girl doing in here? She's, this is normally just soldiers. And she hadn't even said, we couldn't hear what she was saying. So after about 5-6 minutes of her communicating, she came over, and I said, what was that? And she goes, I was talking to a little girl. And I'm thinking, okay, what's the little girl doing? Well, we had just done our Fantasy Fest parade. It's like a big Mardi Gras. And me and Robert, the doll, were grand marshals. But the doll's very fragile, so we had a replica that I had invited the little girl spirit into. I had just brought it back to the fort that night and set it in the tunnel area. So I think that might have been why the little girl was in there. So that was pretty cool. But, not too many people immediately pick up on the little girl. So I'm like, yeah, she's definitely got something. Well, the next morning, my friend called and said, hey, would you be willing to talk to her? And I said, yeah. She said that she had a visitor that night. And her husband had gotten up to go to the bathroom. And she said, she could hear him in the bathroom, and something sat on the bed beside her. And then it leaned over across her back, and it rubbed its head against her head.
oh my.
And I said, can you describe what it looked like? And she said it looked kind of reptilian. And I said, did it look a little bit like Gollum from Lord of the Rings? And she said, yes, absolutely. She said, in my mind's eye, that's very much how I pictured it. And she said, I just remember the noise that it made. And she described the noise, and it was the same noise that I had heard in Tallahassee. And she said, when her husband came back out of the bathroom, that it turned into a black smoke and disappeared. So for her to experience the same thing that I did was pretty mind-blowing. And I asked her, I said, do you think it was the little girl? Do you think it's just, she's 120 years old? She goes, no, it's definitely not her. I said, well, what is it?
That's mad.
She said it's an elemental. She said it was an earth elemental. Now, as much as I know about the paranormal, I had never looked into elementals. I've heard people talk about them, but I never looked into them. So before I responded to her, I went and looked them up. and their spirits attached to the different elements. You know, we have earth, wind, fire, water. But I look in their origins, and their origins in the 1500s, they were first written about by a doctor in Germany during the Renaissance, during the German Renaissance. So I'm thinking, okay, wait a minute. Elementals, Germany. Robert's made in Germany. And then I doing some Googling around. I'm like, could an elemental inhabit a doll? And it says, well, it's not likely to happen unless the doll is made of whatever that element is. And Robert the doll is stuffed with excelsior, which is a wood wool. It's like a tightly spun wood wool. And so I'm thinking, wait a minute. She says earth elemental. The doll's stuffed with trees. And so I look into where the Steiff company would source their excelsior, and it says, well, it doesn't say exactly, but people in that area would have sourced it locally, probably from the Black Forest.
Oh, wow.
And then you have the Black Forest, which is it's in all the Grimm's fairy tales, and it's supposed to be a home to a lot of elementals and other things like that. And so this whole journey, it's fascinating. And I haven't had a chance to process all of this. This is the first time I've talked about it with anybody. But from there, I started looking into German voodoo, and it's saying, it's really just like folklore and folk magic. But then in Pennsylvania, they've got the Pennsylvania Dutch area in Harrisburg, and they have something called powwows. And it came from Germany, and it combines religion with hexes and magic as a form of medicine. And that's the only place in the world where it's practiced. And so what they'll do, like if somebody's sick, instead of giving them medicine, they'll tell them, here, believe in the power of God, and here's this, and rub this on you. So what you have happening from there, the Harrisburg connection, that's where Gene Otto's grandfather first went. He went from Germany to Philadelphia and then Harrisburg and joined the army from there as a doctor. So he would have practiced that. That's the place where my great-great-great-grandfather joined the army, which took him to Key West. He was married to a German woman as well. His entire regiment was pretty much Germans. And then Myrtle Reuter, who cared for Robert before me, she came from Philadelphia. That's where her husband's family was. They had German roots. And before that, her family, which had German roots, they were in Harrisburg. And she came to Key West. So everybody who's taking care of that doll has a Germany, Harrisburg, Key West connection. And with the powwows, that type of medicine, I believe that the grandfather brought it with him to Key West, passed it on to his son, who was the doctor who would have cared for Emmeline Abbott's child, the nanny's child. And so I never knew, like, how did this kid die? We don't have any of that documentation. I found in 1900, the year 1900, Key West Druggist newspaper published by Thomas Otto, Gene's father. And it has advertisements for all of these miracle cures. Dr. King's consumption medicine. And when you look up what was in those today, they contain chloroform, opium, and alcohol, things that would have killed a child with consumption or tuberculosis instead of helping them. So I believe that that's the type of medicine that killed them, and that the mom was so upset that he didn't use real medicine. And that's why she placed the curse.
That's mad. That's crazy, isn't it? It's just crazy. Just want to refer back to a comment. Abby, she asked me, would I personally ever go and visit Robert? Abby, you have been with me a number of times on investigations. What do you think the answer would be to that? That's all I'm going to say. But you know, when it comes to the time for you to pass on Robert to someone else, like when your time's up doing what you're doing with Robert, is there something like a ritual that you have to pass Robert on, or
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think it's a human
I've had
choice.
enough, here you go, you have him now?
I don't think so. I really don't think it's a human choice. When I was chosen, I didn't know that I was. I mean, that only dawned on me that I'm his fourth caretaker about a month ago. I've always looked at myself as the research guy, and I know I've been taking care of the little girl, but it never dawned on me until a month ago. So, and when I look back, all of these things that happened, I mean, that sleeve of the guy in the car who told me go back to the library, I was at my parents' house about a month ago. We were looking at old family photos. There was one of him. He's wearing that suit. It's his Civil War suit. That was his sleeve that I saw. So it's got family who it's stuff I'm still processing it. But I'm confident it's not my choice. There's something greater going on there. I think whoever's next, I bet you they have ties to Pennsylvania and Germany.
It's like Sarah's just said there, Robert might just pick someone. So do you
Yeah.
think it's possible that Robert's picking the people that that looks after him then? Do they have to have certain ties, like you were saying about Germany and things like that, about military? Do you think that's all linked into who looks after Robert then?
I think it could be. I think he was given to the boy. I think that's who it was meant for. I don't think it was meant for anybody else. But then after the boy died, I think there's people who step into the role, and I wouldn't say that it's a great role, because I mean, I know I look insane. I mean, I see exactly how it is, but I do feel an obligation to help these spirits or this spirit or whatever it is. And I don't even know what it is. I won't pretend to know. I keep trying to understand. So something that I think is really cool, when Abby asked her question, we don't know the name of the little girl. Okay. We know that there was the girl who died. We know there was a child who died. And I've been trying to come up with a name for her. And just about a month ago, I thought, well, she's an Abbott. That's her last name, Abbott. And I thought, oh, Abby would be a great name.
And Abby will fit in with this doll without a shit. And I think Nick, her husband, would agree with me on that. Abby and the doll would be great friends, yeah.
The funny thing is, I spell it ABI, and I just looked over in the comments there, and it looks like Abby spells it the same way.
There you go, Nick. Pack Abby up, send her to Key West. There you go. Send her going to Robert. But that's great. So what do you have coming up with Robert the doll? Like, do you have any more appearances or anything planned? And what other research are you planning on doing to find out more about Robert?
Right now, I'm just processing a lot of the stuff, and I'm digging deep, like, into the powwows. And it's funny because I found so many articles about children dying with the powwow doctors. So I'm doing that. I'm researching the genealogy of the different people. I was talking to my dad, saying, he's a big genealogist. I was asking him if he can connect us to the Stife Company or to something else, and or any of the Ottos. And he goes, oh, he said, yeah, you're descended from Otto the Great. And I mean, that's going back to the year, I think, 900. So there's a lot of people descended from him. But when he said that, in the Otto family history that the boy's sister did, Mitzvah, it talks about how they're descended from Otto the Great. so that was interesting. So if I can find that connection with Myrtle Reuter too, where we all share the same bloodline, that would be fascinating. But in March, we're going to do a paranormal weekend here in Key West, where we're going to recreate the Philip experiment, which is where they tried to create a haunted doll. Oh, they didn't try to create a haunted doll. They tried
they tried to create a spirit by giving it a name. It was like a group of, I don't know if they were paranormal. In fact, I think I've seen this on YouTube or some kind of show,
Mm.
and they basically they devised a plan of who the person was, what their work history was, where they come from, and then they tried to do like call outs to see if a spirit relating to what they've written. Is that what you're referring to?
Absolutely, yeah. Philip Islesford. It was a Canadian experiment they did, and they created this fictitious spirit, and then he came through and started communicating with them. So we're doing a Robert the Doll weekend where everything's going to be themed towards haunted dolls, but we'll do an experiment where we try to create haunted dolls and then test to see if we've been successful. You know, because haunted dolls are an interesting phenomena. I've got theories on it, and I've been testing them out, and I've tried to create haunted objects. What I really believe happens, I think that there's energy out there, and it will go wherever we direct ours, because you know, spirits can't just eat a sandwich, so they rely on our energy. So like whenever you know, if we focus on an object and we're saying this is haunted, and we put all that energy, I think spirits will come in. So like, you know, with Robert the Doll, you know, a lot of entities coming in there and being Robert the Doll. I think it's the same thing. So that'll be interesting to test. We're also going to be doing we're going to do a seance in Robert's old room at the artist house. You know, just a lot of then some great talks. We've got Dustin Perry's going to be there. We've got Brad Blair and Brad and Tim who started the Michigan Paranormal Conference, which is one of the probably the most popular one in the United States. So it's going to be a fun group of us. It's going to be a real intimate experience.
Wow.
And
That sounds amazing. It sounds great. Just to ask, well, Sarah has asked, has Robert ever traveled away from Key West?
Yeah, he's traveled three times really. They brought him to Islamorada twice when I was up there to do a talk. Every time he's traveled, something bad has happened. The first time he traveled was to like outside of Tampa for TAPS Paranormal Conference.
Mm.
And someone who was disrespectful there was struck by lightning after that. When he was brought up for me to speak in Islamorada, the curator got home that night and she left Robert in the car overnight. You know, she didn't want to go back to the museum. That night, her cat died.
Oh.
And then Zach Baggins flew Robert to Las Vegas when he opened his haunted museum, first class. And if you watch, they have a guy named Theodore who they say is his butler. Theodore's actually an actor, but he wasn't acting with what happened. He disrespected Robert, and he had a stroke.
Wow.
And so these very real things happen when Robert travels. But you also have to think that's the artifact. You know, that's the main artifact traveling. And the glass does not contain the spirits by any means. We have spirits following people all around the world. You know, the curses that people report after they're disrespectful, those happen everywhere. And I've got, you know, an interesting theory too. People say, where does this portal come from?
I was just about to ask, where is this portal, you know, come from? So, yeah, that'd be great.
And nobody knows, but I've got a theory. Where the Otto home is built, there's churches all around. You know, it used to be called Calle Iglesia, but you know, the church street. And through time, these churches have grown bigger, and that meant encroaching on their own cemeteries or graveyards. So you have St. Paul's, and they're built on top of a graveyard. And then you have the Old Stone Methodist across the street from the Otto House. That's built on top of a cemetery. And the Otto House is next to the old Baptist church. And that one burned down. It was rebuilt. But the lot where the Otto House is would be right where the cemetery would have been. And I talked to someone who used to stay at the Otto House when they were young with where Gene and Ann were. And they said, yeah, you know, Gene used to try to scare us. And he said that the house was built on a graveyard. So Me and the manager went underneath there and crawled around, and we found bones. I can't say they were human. One of them looked like an old part of a hip bone, but like really really old.
Hmm.
Uh, and then some of them I think were animal bones. You know, probably a possum or something grabbed it, or a cat, and went underneath there to eat it. But we found this one stone that was very intricate, and it looked very much like it could have been something that broke off of a headstone or a gravestone. So I think there's some merit to the idea that there is an ancient or an older, you know, probably something from the early 1800s, and I think that could be a source.
That's a great theory, you know. And it's just, you know, the whole story. And we can talk, because I know there's a lot more information. This is just like just the tip of the iceberg with the story of Robert. And I think it would be great, you know, especially maybe after you do the theory with the Phillips theory, you know, to bring you back on and see what took place and how that mapped out. If you would be up for doing something like that, I'm sure everyone would love to, you know, come back and revisit this and definitely follow up and see what's happened since this chat today.
I would absolutely love that, and you know, I love the questions that everyone here has been asking, and you know, if people start looking into the elementals and look into some of those connections, I'd love to hear anything that people come up with, because you know, right now, so much of what we're doing is just theories, and we're constantly learning more and more and trying to get that entire picture. And I feel like I'm being guided, and every place that I go, I think it's for a reason. So you know, if anybody thinks they can help out, then by all means, let me know.
Yeah. My last question to you is, you're very involved. How much does others around you that work with you, how involved do they get, or do they keep their, like say, we'll do so much, but the crazy stuff, the stuff that getting into it, delving really deep into it, do they leave you just to do it on your own?
No, no, you know, I've got a small team that I work with, and we're pretty much like a family, and they're all very much into this. You know, I've had people I've worked with who didn't believe in spirits, but then after one night at the fort, it's without doubt they're a believer. Now the museum staff during the day, you know, they know that they're there to protect Robert as an artifact. They understand the story. They understand that people go there to see these things with Robert. But you know, in the daytime when they visit, the Robert's on display. People can go and see him, but they're not getting the full story. They're not getting the whole tour, because we'll take people. We do like a 30-minute ghost tour through the fort, and then we've got chairs set up in Robert's room, and we lock the doors, and we spend 30 minutes where people get a short video that tells the true history. And then the guides will explain these different theories, and we'll run spirit boxes and do different equipment and see if we can't get the spirits to interact with us. And then we do a VIP thing where the guests can get an extra hour on their own. We turn off all the lights in the fort, and we give them different ghost hunting equipment. They can go off and do their own investigations for an hour.
What, in the room with Robert? Just
And anywhere, the entire fort.
wow.
Yeah.
That's yeah, that sounds a lot to deal with. Sarah's just said, are we safe even talking about Robert? He who must not be named, a bit like Voldemort out of Harry Potter, she's saying.
Yeah, and it's interesting because somewhere along the way, people said that you can't look at a picture of Robert. They say that you know, if you accidentally see a video, you have to say, "I'm sorry, Robert." And what I've found is, you know, there's no basis for that. But then when these things happen, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think when people have these beliefs sometimes, if they put out that energy of, uh-oh, I looked at that picture, something's going to get me, I think there can be energies around them that they're attracting by doing that. I don't believe that they're Robert. With Robert, my experience has been you're not going to make a mistake and suddenly have this horrible curse. It has to be intentional.
Yeah.
Intentional disrespect. So, and approach it like, you know, approach it like you would a person. You know, you know if you're being disrespectful, or that person will let you know if they feel that you're being disrespectful. And I've really found that that people are fine in that case. So I don't think Robert's going to come through the screen and get you. I think his spirit can be far-reaching, but again, it depends on which of the spirits you're attracting. And I'm really looking forward to exploring the elemental spirit, because that they're supposed to be mischievous. There's something called, I think it's a kobold, or like it's KOBALT or something. That's one of these spirits from the Black Forest that seems to have characteristics like Robert. So I'm looking into that, and I really want to try to get in touch with those playful spirits, because that's what I feel it is more. You know, it's that child innocence that can get angry like a child or throw a little tantrum. But I think the evil that's come along with it, I think that's energy that humans have brought out.
Okay, I get what you're saying. So yeah, it is great. And you know, everything we've discussed tonight has been absolutely amazing. I'm sure everyone would agree. You know, so I would definitely love to follow this back up with you in the new year, if that's all right with you, David.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Know,
I'd be happy to join you anytime.
I think this could be a part 2, part 3, because it sounds like you're getting more information as time goes on, and it'll be great to follow this through and just see what's been going on since the last time we spoke. But no, I just want to say a massive thank you for joining us and sharing your experience, you know, that you've had with Robert so far. It's been awesome, you know, listening to your stories, your theories. And I just really want to thank you for joining us tonight. It's been absolutely a pleasure just getting to know you and the history that you've had with Robert. And I'm sure everyone in the audience would agree. It's been great listening to you tell the story about Robert and everything that you've gone through together.
Well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate all the great questions. And, you know, if anybody comes to Key West, we've got a free haunted directory online that'll tell them all the haunted hotels, haunted restaurants, bars, you know, tours, all that stuff. So, you know, they can look me up, and I'd love to chat, and I'm looking forward to coming back with you.
Definitely. And just to let you know, after the show, I will be putting in David's link to his website, where you can read a lot more about David's history. He's an author. He's written books. So if you want to find out more about David and what he's done around Key West, please go over to his website and check it out. A lot of information, great information there. So I'll post that in the comments after the show. But I just want to say thank you so much for tonight, David, or today, because I know it's daytime for you. It's been absolutely great, again, getting to know you. And we will definitely be keeping in touch. And we'll do a follow-up in the new year with you. I think it will be great.
Great. Thank you so much, Nando.
No problem at all. Thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your day, David.
All right. Happy hauntings.
And you take care. Wow. What an absolute great chat, you know, about the doll, the history. And I'm sure you will all agree. David has a great way of, you know, explaining everything that's happened with the doll, his theories. And we will definitely be following this up with David in the future. You know, I think there's a lot more to be told about Robert the doll, and see what he uncovers and everything. But as always, I just want to say thank you to everyone that stuck around this evening. All your great questions, having a bit of a laugh. Abby, I think you're going to be part of the Key West, so it's been nice knowing you. Let us know how you get on with Robert. But no, as always, it's been great having you all in tonight and getting involved. We will be back soon, so do check our Facebook page. If you're not following us, please go over, follow, and then you'll get all the updates. You can go through YouTube. And if you're in England, check our website out, portaltothe-paranormal.co.uk. We have a lot of events coming up for 2025. Our final event this year is at Calverton Hatch, and there's still places. So if you want to join us and experience a ghost hunt and what we do, please get in touch, and we'll be happy to have you join us. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye. Everyone enjoy your weekend, and we will be back soon. So take care, everyone. Bye.